one of the very early meetings I had, somebody said, that's Abdul Aziz. And he looked at me and he says, who did you study under? And I just mentioned one of my teachers, Habib Ahmed Mashur, khalas. That's all he said, khalas. He didn't ask anything else. Because he knew my teacher immediately. I've been with him when he's asked somebody else, so who was your teacher? And they said, so-and-so. Okay, and who did he study under? Oh, okay. And then he says, now I know who you are. And sometimes I've heard him say, who did you study under? And who did he study under? And who did he study under? Okay, now I know. And sometimes he's gone 3 or 4 times and he says, okay. And then he just turned around and gone somewhere else. Because that person's chain is not known. He studied under somebody who studied under somebody who studied under somebody who studied under somebody who's not known. Why is that important? It's because hadith is connected to the Prophet ﷺ. We don't just study hadith, we study hadith and nabawi, the prophetic hadith. And the way of studying hadith is to connect yourself to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. There was one of the ulama of Seerah, he was actually the Mufti of Damascus, Shaykh Abdul Aziz, and this was about 50 years ago. He was in the mosque teaching hadith, and the mu'adhin called the adhan, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, which was the hadith, the adhan that we hear in every country in the world. And some young man stood up and started screaming, Bid'ah! Does he not know the hadith of Muslim, where he says, the Prophet ﷺ says, Allahu Akbar bil Fatha, which is not what everybody else hears around the whole world. Apparently this sheikh, or this young man, who then later claimed to be a sheikh, had said that he'd studied hadith, and of course he's speaking in front of the mufti and muhaddith, and the mu'adhin is doing bid'ah because he's reading it with a dhamma instead of a fatha, and I know better than him because I've read the hadith where it says it with a fatha. So he called the young man out and he says, did you study the book that was printed with the title Sahih Muslim, or did you study the collection of Muslim with somebody who studied the collection with somebody who studied the collection with somebody who studied the collection with somebody? Or was it just the book you studied? And at that the man stormed out. But you see what the difference between the real muhaddithin are and the people that claim to be muhaddithin. So I'm not a muhaddith, but the hadith that I've studied, the 40 hadith that I've studied under people who really were ulama. And therefore I'm confident that the knowledge that I've got may only be very small, but it's sound. And that's what's important, is that hadith is not about how many you know, but it's about how well you know them.